be welcome. Welcome to Totnes, for those of you who don't live in this amazing town. Amazing town with people who have big ideas and lots of action. We're fully engaged. Very recently, in my role on the town council, we declared a climate emergency, and that's fantastic. We're all doing so much, both on an individual and a collective level, but we need to do more. We need to operate nationally and internationally. We need a system change, and this is why we've got our speakers here today, and they're going to introduce the debate, and I'll speak more later. Thank you.
We're delighted to have three amazing speakers for us today to address this question of climate and politics. A lot of people think climate is above politics, and here are three people who can persuade us that actually politics and climate are intricately linked. We have Dr. Patrick O'Sullivan, who has taught environmental science and policy and philosophy for 35 years. Now he is our policy officer for South East Cornwall Labour, and he's a member of the policy and research team for the Labour for a Green New Deal, the motion that we passed so recently and successfully at conference. Ben Sollery is a lifelong activist on environmental and constitutional issues. He's worked with groups like Charter 88, the World Development Movement, Positive Money, and Extinction Rebellion. And Ben's work with Extinction Rebellion is particularly relevant in terms of thinking about democratic structures, how we find the best leverage points for that systemic change. And last but definitely not least, we have Claire Moody, a very recently Labour MEP for the South West, sitting on many committees including foreign affairs, industry, research, energy and women's rights. And before this she spent a couple of years working for then Prime Minister Gordon Brown in Downing Street. And she's passionate, I know, about climate change and about job security here in the South West. Now the format we're going to take is I'm going to ask each of the speakers to spend 5 or maybe at the most 10 minutes giving a short position statement. Then we're going to open the meeting up for your questions and contributions and make it a little bit more of a discussion. So I hope you will give a big hand to our three speakers and then they can speak all at once.
But I also am a member of the research and policy team for the Labour for a Green New Deal. And so, like a lot of my generation, and I think probably maybe a few people here, I only recently joined the Labour Party about 3 years ago because until that time it wasn't red enough for me and it wasn't green enough either. But now there are a lot of us, and we probably have as many numbers of green people in our party as in any other party, I think. So when I heard about the Green New Deal back in March, I joined in, and it is a true grassroots campaign. Anybody who's sympathises, who's in tune with the aims of the Green New Deal, which were very carefully discussed at first, can join in. Anyone can join in who's in sympathy with it. It's not the same as the Green Industrial Revolution, which is something that Rebecca Long-Bailey is running. And that's a kind of top-down programme, although it is based on grassroots consultation. Now, the Green New Deal is not Labour's idea, of course, and any Greens here are going to tell me that they thought of it first. But actually, it was. There's also lots of other ones in other countries. Now, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez is also doing that kind of thing in the States. In this country, there was a group of people, including Larry Elliott, who's the finance editor of The Guardian, and Ann Pettifer, the economist, who started the Green New Deal back in 2007. Okay, so it comes from there. Now this is the problem. Okay, so what is it? The conference motion we submitted, which was passed by the Labour conference, it calls for a massive state-led programme of investment and regulation for decarbonisation and transformation of the UK economy. But it also, at the same time, addresses inequality. It says if you don't address social issues, and particularly inequality, at the same time as you do this, then in fact the same people who are disadvantaged today will be disadvantaged by any new society. The whole aim is to contribute to the idea, of course, of keeping temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is the Paris target. Well, why is it so strong on inequality? The answer, I think, is that a key principle of red-green environmentalism, my kind of environmentalism, the reason why, while I was waiting for the Labour Party to develop on its own, is that the same forces which oppress nature are those which oppress people. They're exactly the same thing. And so therefore, any truly red-green environmental policy, as one of our councillors in Cornwall, Anna Gillett, recently said, has to begin with social justice. If you begin with nature, you may not be able to address the issues of inequality. If you begin with society and work towards nature, which is the way the Green New Deal works, that's how we thought it would be the best way. So in fact, as the history of the last 40 years shows, application of unregulated, neoliberal free market capitalism, globalized capitalism, also leads not just to massive inequality amongst humans, but massive degradation of nature. They're the same thing, and it's all happened a lot of it's happened in the last 40 years. In other words, basically everything we've done in terms of social and environmental policy as a species, collectively, since about 1980, has been almost all of it's been totally wrong. We were doing the wrong things. When we let the free market rip from about 1980 onwards, when Ronnie Reagan was elected, so ever since then, basically, I've been watching change and thinking, no, that's exactly the wrong thing to do. And that's one of the problems. So, the Green New Deal attempts to be a coherent and well-planned strategy, and it's leading to reversing climate change, and it's based on the idea that individual actions and consumer actions are important, but together they will not be enough. What we need is a carefully planned strategy, and it will allow the major players on this planet who are responsible for the climate change, for the climate emergency. It won't allow them to escape from having to pay the consequences of their actions. And it's well known, I think, now. Sorry, my mask, I'm very dry. It's well known now that just 100 companies are responsible for the majority of carbon emission. So individual actions are important, but Michael Mann, the guy who invented the hockey stick graph, one of the guys anyway, he's recently said that attention has been deflected from imposing policy solutions of this kind towards stressing that changes should be made in individual behaviour, in people's diet and their methods of travel and their lifestyle choices. And those things are all important, but he said it's a classic industry manoeuvre to deflect the attention from where the real causes of these are, which is that people, unfettered free market capitalism is destroying our planet. And so individual actions are important, but we must be aware that there is, and he of course was subjected to a very severe campaign which questioned his data about 10 years ago, which I happened to watch a TV program about last night. I think the other reason why we need collective action is there is a theory that once the Berlin Wall came down and Ronnie Reagan was elected, organised capital was no longer afraid of us. It stopped being nice to us. It gave us lots of nice pay increases and a welfare state until that happened. But once there was no apparent competitor in the form of the old Soviet Union, not that it was any kind of competitor, once that happened, they were no longer afraid of us. But the climate emergency just might be another way of scaring them to get them to be afraid of us again, because they need to be aware of the fact of what they're doing. So, that was the idea then, to have some kind of coordinated collective strategy. Very briefly, it calls for a commitment to net carbon zero emissions by 2030, phasing out fossil fuels, large-scale investment in renewables, etc. Retrofitting our housing stock, which gives off an enormous amount of emissions, developing an integrated green transport system, but also exploring exploring methods of democratic public ownership. So, in fact, again, this is to address the issues of inequality. We need to make what John McDonnell calls a just transition to well-paid, secure jobs, for unionised green jobs for everyone. There is a fallacy that's been going around for years, which is that green policies reduce the number of jobs in the labour market. Nothing could be further from the truth. If you do things in a green, local way, that creates more employment, and that's something that the Green New Deal is opening a dialogue with organised labour about. Assuming everyone's basic rights through the provision of universal basic services, but also something about transfer of resources and technology and knowledge to the global south, because of course historically countries like Britain have a long record of missions which are based on a colonialist economy. So therefore not trying to keep climate refugees out, but welcoming climate refugees and trying to reduce the displacement of people by climatic and other factors. Right, that's a big secret of my time.
And I think Patrick sketched over very quickly what is the most awesome thing about it, which is climate neutral by 2030. That's something worth voting for.
Carbon neutral.
Carbon neutral, sorry, Patrick. So, Vinicius Ben now is speaking. He does not represent XR. That's not how XR works, but he has a lot of experience working within XR, and let's give him a good welcome.
Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me. As I say, I'm not a spokesperson for XR, but I can share my experience, and perhaps that of 30 years, probably like a lot of you, of banging your head against a brick wall and not really getting anywhere. That's where I found myself last April, when I was watching from far, I was live streaming from Waterloo Bridge, and thinking, oh, XR's not going to work, it's another thing. And then each day it just seemed to grow and grow, and they seemed to stay there, and they were doing things differently, and I was really moved, and I had the privilege to be able to go up to London and just spend 24 hours there in April for their big action, and it was inspiring. I mean, politics should be fun. I think it's really good, and it was the most... most sort of joyous, the flags, the drumming, and also the enthusiasm and the positivity of those people who we went on a march to, from Marble Arch to Parliament Square, and I was leafleting alongside it, and it was the easiest leafleting I've ever done in political work. They were taking them off me. They really wanted to know. I think this is something underreported. Even in October, the action which has just gone on for 2 weeks, when I went for a week, it was a lot tougher. But even there, people were really enthusiastic on there. There were a few angry folk, but on the whole, they were being really disrupted, but they really took on board, a bit of disruption now to save a hell of a lot of disruption later. What's XR's take on it, as far as I'm concerned? Their first demand is tell the truth. I mean, that sounds a bit of a given, isn't it? Tell the truth. But it's tell the truth and act as if it were real. I mean, the other day, every day we hear something new doing. 11,000 scientists came up with a report that they were headed for untold human suffering. I didn't know we had 11,000 scientists, but untold human suffering. I mean, that's pretty big, isn't it? You'd have thought then that, any sort of response which was really taking that seriously would be the first item on every news, the first concern, or every day, the first part of every conversation almost. I mean, it's, the floods in North England right now. Where is the putting of that in the framework of climate crisis? That would be telling the truth. So, That's the first demand of exile. The truth is, yeah, we're in real trouble, aren't we? I mean, as Churchill said, during the Second World War, during the Second World War, it's not enough to try our best. We have to do what's necessary. We have to do what's necessary. Everything that's put forward as a solution or part of the solution, we've got to measure against that criteria, haven't we? Is this going to produce what's necessary? The second demand of exile is get to zero carbon by 2025. I don't want to hear about whether people think that's feasible, or we're going to. We have to do that. We have to do that. Yeah. So that's the second demand of exile. And that telling the truth does point to also the way, that's why exile is going about it in the way they are. And let's be clear, they've had real success. As I heard the Liberal Democrats, I think, on the news yesterday or today, they used the word climate emergency. The word emergency was not on the agenda anywhere before exile put it there in April. They've put it at the agenda. And they've done that by doing politics differently. I mean, it's been incredibly moving to witness people who haven't got anywhere near being arrested, putting themselves up for that, often multiple times. And that is really what's, there's a lot of reflection now, post-October, about what maybe the strategy will be going forward. But up to now, that has at least worked. And I think maybe that should be an indication to all parties that, be open to working differently. And that working differently is about really bringing all of ourselves to campaigning, not just our heads, Exile is fantastic, and it really does embrace the fact that we're human beings with human feelings, and it's quite natural to have big feelings in response to the situation we find ourselves. I mean, anybody who's not extremely angry or upset or worried is frankly not a feeling human being. So we need to make exile deliberately makes room for those feelings, and I just think that's a way of really owning the truth of the situation we're in. And certainly as Greta Thunberg says, you can only deal with a crisis if you call it a crisis. Exile have helped with calling it a crisis. So their third demand is their best idea for a more deliberative decision making, which is a People's Assembly, which has worked very well in places like Ireland with the abortion question. I'm sure there are all sorts of problems with it, but it's a good stab, and at least it's an idea for how to go forward, and an indication that we have to do politics differently, which really is be a bit humble about it and to say we don't necessarily know all the answers now, but we're going to start anyway, and we haven't got exclusive ownership of the truth. Everybody has a part to play, and also that we kind of need everybody. We can't do it on our side of the fence. Everybody's got to be. We need everybody's talents and everybody on board with making these changes. I think that's probably enough for me. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Ben, and what a great start to what will be a difficult election period. Be human, be truthful, and be playful. What a wonderful set of principles to take into our politics. I'm now going to bring Claire forward to be the last of our speakers. There'll be plenty more time to hear from all three of them and ask them questions. Claire.
Thank you very much. And can I just first of all say how brilliant it is to see so many of you in this room this morning to listen to us, but also because you care about this issue. And I think that, along with what Ben was saying about the not just the what Extinction Rebellion have done and the way that they have carried out the protests, but also exactly as Ben said, the public response to what Extinction Rebellion have done as well. As well as the things that I have done that Helen outlined, I spent 20 years working for the trade union movement. We're quite used to doing protests in the trade union movement. We're quite used to being on the streets in London and this kind of thing. But we never got the warmth, and we got some warmth and we got a lot of support, but the warmth of the response and the recognition of the challenge and the crisis that we face in the arena around climate is of a different order. And whilst I wish we had some of those responses from the trade union movement, I am very pleased to see that Extinction Rebellion got that different public response. I want to follow on from what both Patrick and Ben have said to talk about this in the context of foreign policy as well as domestic policy. And I was pleased that, Louise, you mentioned that in your introduction speech, because it really does matter. As we know, this is a global issue, and it is not something that we can solve just within our own borders. This is something that we are going to have to resolve cooperatively and collaboratively around the world. And it is possible for our country to have a leadership role within that. And I think it is really, really important that we do take that responsibility and embrace it and take a global perspective on climate change in all of the work. Now, I have to say, I am not comfortable with the prospect of a Tory government doing that and taking that seriously. And it comes to as well, there are two things that, again, I'm sorry, I'm referencing the earlier speakers that Ben said. And one is the point about truth. Because, I was listening to Ben Gove again this morning talking about planting trees and all that kind of thing. He said exactly the same in the 2015 manifesto, but they didn't follow through on it. And the second thing is about the heart and putting heart into politics. And I know that that's why I'm in politics. I am in politics, or have been an elected politician, because of my head, because rationally I know the way you deliver change is by taking part, by stepping up to the plate and getting into a position where you can help to deliver that change. But equally, there's no point doing that if it isn't in your heart as well, if this isn't something you fundamentally care about and actually you are driven emotionally as well as intellectually. And that's where this is absolutely, again, the issue of climate change, the issue of transforming our planet is in the DNA of the Labour Party. And that's why I am praying to goodness for so many reasons, but this one particularly, that actually we achieve a Labour government in December this year. And having been both involved in a Labour government of 2008 to 2010 when we hosted the G20 and actually successfully were involved in changing the dynamic at that time in terms of investment, that you had to invest your way out of the recession, and we successfully did that. Unfortunately, that then was completely scuppered in 2010. But also, knowing that next year we have COP26 in Glasgow in this country. And that is the kind of next big milestone after Paris. Paris achieved some things. I know a lot of people know it didn't go far enough, but actually it was a good starting point. We need Glasgow to be the conference that then nails that down and delivers change in actual outcomes and policies in a way that builds on what was achieved at Paris. So that's one concrete example where we have a leadership opportunity. But also, this is about foreign policy, it is about how we behave in other countries, what our role is through our embassies, through our outreach, and that's through the FCO. Again, it is about what's driving our policy. And I heard a really good interview with Paul Mason on the radio this morning where he was being challenged about our broadband policy. Great policy, I'm happy to go into that further. But what Paul said was that this isn't about sort of nationalisation for nationalisation's sake. This isn't those being told we're going back to the 70s. So there is a transformative intent behind the Labour manifesto to deliver on climate change. And that this is part of that. So when you know that you have a driving mission inside a government, then it is easier to deliver that transformative policy in your embassies. It's easier to deliver that as a kind of outreach in terms of working with people. And we're talking, Patrick was talking about the retrofitting work we need to do in the UK. Well, in some countries, we are working with those countries on how they develop their energy systems, on how they develop various areas. So rather than retrofitting, we can, by example, by working with new technologies, we can work with countries that they are actually in a position to be climate friendly as they develop as well. So this is kind of part of what we could be doing. It also goes into trade. And it goes into, I am, again, not going to put much faith in Liz Truss as the Secretary of State for Trade to be working on this agenda. However, I do believe that when we are working in the sort of trade sphere, there are good rules. I've worked on them in the European Union. There are good rules around how you make sure trade is just. But it is also then, we have had the opportunities to invest in research and invest in developing great technologies. Well, we should be sharing those technologies as well and ensuring that we therefore are in a position that other countries don't go through the dirty industrial revolutions that we've been through, but that they are also able then to go straight to green technologies with a lot of natural resources that are available in many countries as well. So that's the message I want to kind of drive home to all of you this morning, is that this is going to be the core of all the work that a Labour government will be doing.
And this is the chance that you have to speak and to have discussion with the three speakers that we have. And I think it's amazing we have, if I'm allowed to characterise them this way, we have a scientist, we have a civil activist, and we have a party politician here who have devoted a huge amount of time to thinking about and learning about and acting on these issues. So how I'm going to run the rest of this meeting is I'm going to take questions and short contributions in groups of 2 or 3, and then I'm going to put them to the panel and ask them if they want to respond. I'm sure we all want to be part of a really big conversation, but we know in our town that conversation is ongoing. So try to limit what you have to say today to something short, something that can invite a response, something that people can approach, and we'll get the conversation going, and it will go on for many weeks and months, and hopefully long into the lifetime of the next Labour government. So I'd like to open the floor now.
I would just like to understand a bit more what's happening in the local context. So you mentioned that you said you're a councillor with South Hams, and for anyone in the room who's thinking of designing actions in the here and now to try and drive home this message and try and affect change locally, what is the current situation? Where is the best place for people who are interested in local actions to put their time and energy? If you can give us some themes and ideas, that would be great.
Sounds like a good place that I'll bring Louise back in the room, because I know she's very involved in that as town councillor.
My question is about mitigation of the greenhouse gases that are already in the atmosphere. There's a consensus that if we're not to go above 1.5 degrees centigrade heating, we also need to be withdrawing from the atmosphere.
So the road very far. I'll summarise, don't worry.
About taking greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere. There's a lot being said about high-tech solutions to this, using biomass. There's also using, restoring and conserving tropical forests, salt marshes, seagrass beds off the coast of Britain, and restoring these ecosystems, which are suffering a lot of loss of biodiversity. So my question is whether, I'll be quick, just, what's in the plan about that? I haven't heard anything from Labour about that yet. It's critically important and a very good way of doing the mitigation.
There are things in the Green New Deal about that, exactly what you just mentioned. There is a paper on agriculture and there is a paper on landscape, the two are written by the same group of people. As for high-tech solutions, as a scientist, I've always been mistrustful of carbon capture because there's this thing called the law of thermodynamics, which says that systems work from organised to disorganised. Trying to reverse that law is quite a difficult thing, if you ask me. So I've always been slightly sceptical about that technology. Also, nature has its own mechanisms. It has its own feedback mechanisms. If you can nudge them to work, then that would be maybe a good idea. So, restoring landscapes which have been changed, particularly in very strong engineering ways, allowing floodplains to be floodplains. There is a serious problem, of course, with this because there are several thousand houses still being built on floodplains in this country every year, which does seem to be, as we can see at the moment, kind of a dangerous thing to do. And my sympathy is with the people who are flooded in the Don Valley. But if that area was taken, there is an Environment Agency plan, catchment plan for the Don, as there is for all the basin. But it needs to incorporate things in the headwaters to stop the water coming down in the first place, creating wetlands, which also are carbon sinks. So restoring the landscape and the kind of ecosystems you mentioned, and stop using them as building concrete of them is really quite a good idea.
I will just need Louise to speak further on the local context, but what I just wanted to come in on, and I have deliberately avoided mentioning the B word so far, but the largest research programme in the world is the European Union Research Programme. The current one is called Horizon 2020. It's a 7-year programme going from 2014 to 2020. And the next one is called Horizon Europe and will start in 2021. The Industry Research and Energy Committee, I was involved in the negotiations for the next research programme. And because of the Socialist group in the Parliament, working with the Green group, working with others, which we just do naturally in the European Parliament, 35% of that research programme, which in the next round quite possibly will be up to 100 billion euros over 7 years, 35% of that is going to be focused on climate and energy. So, it's about climate change. So, that kind of investment, I was listening to something again on the radio on the way down and talking about fungi that can recycle plastics in a way that we just don't know, and that we can do it in a non-oxygen environment, so in our waste places as well, for example. You only find out about that kind of thing if you invest in the research. And it's actually by investing in that research on both working out what is out there that can be used in a different way to help us solve these problems, but also coming up with new technologies and new ways of solving these problems. So whatever our future relationship with the European Union, to take from that one as well, we have to be engaged in that research program. And not just because we need to be part of that, but actually also we have brilliant scientists in this country who we need to be part of that program, to be part of coming up with the solutions. Just up the road, you've got the Met Office. There are, I think, 200 scientists in the Met Office working on this climate change issue. We need them to be part of creating the solutions, coming up with the solutions, and that's just one small example. Thank you.
While Louise is just coming to join us to address some of the local issues, I will just mention, as I'm sure Claire would have later on any longer, the Science Innovation Fund, which Labour is establishing, which is specifically for ecological restoration and sustainable food production. And a constituency like ours, which has led the country in both food industry and sustainable food production, would benefit and contribute massively to that Science Innovation Fund. Now, there's been some questions about the local position, and I know Louise has done a lot. You've done a lot locally on climate action. I just wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, sure. Hello. So, locally, as Helen said, I'm a town councillor, and I work very closely and have a very good relationship, I don't know if Jack is here, with our Mayor, Jackie Hodgson. And on the Town Council, we've declared a climate emergency, which was fantastic. I think we got just one abstention. We've got another councillor here. I won't, I'll let you try and guess who that might have been. So the result of that is that we've then set up some climate emergency working groups, which I'm on, and we're looking at some really good initiatives locally. We're looking at measuring our carbon footprint, for example. So that's one of the things we're doing. We're trying to decarbonise our town council buildings. So we're also doing a carbon audit. Plastic Free, we've got so many groups in Totnes working on environmental issues. We've got Plastic Free Totnes, which is fun. I don't know if anybody was there last weekend at the Greater Wrap. That's also fantastic. We're doing rewilding projects. We are also, I'm also a member of Frack Free Totnes. I don't know if Peter Scott is here. No. But I went to see our now ex-MP with Peter Scott to persuade her to sign up to the Diverse Parliament initiative, which she did. I'm also on the Tadpole Committee, and as part of the Green New Deal policy, one of the initiatives we want to put solar panels on all public buildings, and I am going to and as part of a town council representative with Tadpole, I've arranged for Tressock, I never get it right, the pronunciation. Ian Bright from Tressock is going to come to our meeting next month and going to talk about how we can get solar panels put on the roof of the swimming pool. But we need it on the town council building. We need it everywhere, and this is one aspect of the Green New Deal. But going back to Claire's, Patrick's point, we need to retrofit homes. We need to make homes energy efficient. In Totnes, we don't have enough genuinely affordable homes, and homes that are not energy efficient they hit everybody, but they hit the poorest the hardest. So we really need to make that a key part of Labour Party policy. All this is wonderful. You asked the question, how can you get involved? We have got the Climate Emergency Working Group, which I'm very happy to talk to you about, how you can get involved locally after this meeting. But there are so many other groups. There might be some people here representing the local groups. So what I have observed is that we're not very joined up. We seem to be operating in silos, and I think we do need to join up and have a more unified approach. Something I'm very keen to do, and I know it's not popular. I think Robert Fint might share my views on this. Is I would like to pedestrianise our high streets. It's obvious, and there are some, but I want to do that because I think I want to make our communities healthy and enjoyable for all. It's awful going up the high street, and it's really not great. It doesn't allow disabled access. It doesn't, and parents with children, and it's just not a very pleasant experience. Choking on petrol fumes. So these are the sort of things. I've also got solar panels on my roof, and I've got rescue hens, which is all, it's all great. We're all doing our bit. But however, these local initiatives are brilliant, but we're not going to tackle this climate emergency if we just operate in a very localised, individualistic way. Current policy, government policy, seems to be very much about bringing it back to the individual. It's individual responsibility, and we are individually to blame. Yes, of course, we can play our part individually, but we need to refocus this to looking at. We need to refocus it so that we're looking at putting people before profit, people and planet before profit. As all the speakers said, from a neoliberal system which doesn't benefit people, it benefits big business. Labour is going to decarbonise by 2030. The Lib Dems, sadly, are only 15 years later, and instead of challenging our economic system, they're simply going to ask big businesses to sign up to a code of practice. So they're going to ask big businesses, could you please, could we ask you nicely to not invest in fossil fuels? How do you think that's going to play out? We are only in climate and social justice if we implement this Green New Deal and the Labour government.
I will put a question to the panel about how best to stop Johnson and the Johnson government here in Totnes, and I'm asked to do that.
Stand up as well when you talk so we can't see you.
Does anyone want to take that one on?
I'm going to be asked to. It genuinely is a difficult question, but I would say, let me respond, sorry. I would say two things. One is that the Labour Party is a national party. We are standing everywhere. The Tory Party are standing everywhere. We are going to stand everywhere. So
that's my questions for the National Party. Party as well. So,
Yeah. So no, I understand that, and there is no question but that there are going to be 600. Well, actually, I think 640. Just that, but because you take out Northern Ireland, but across England, Wales, and Scotland, there will be Labour candidates in every constituency, and that isn't going to change. But my second point is that I actually also get a little bit queasy about parties telling voters what their choice is. And actually, a lot of what we talk about is about, building up from the bottom, about grassroots, and it was what Patrick was saying is this isn't just about top down, it's also about bottom up. Voters are not to be taken, I was going to say for fools, that's not the way I actually want to put it in this context. Voters have a right to make their own choice. And, they are aware of all the issues. This is, a general election. It is about...
Hobson's choice, isn't it?
Can we just
It's up to it is the voters' choice. And they will determine who they elect in this constituency. And that actually is, that is the right way to go about it. I think if you start doing deals behind doors as parties, you actually are... We disagree on this, clearly, and I'm not... I don't want to fall out about it in any personal way. But I actually think you get into a very difficult and dangerous point in democracy if you start going, you cannot have the party of your choice. Because I think you can tell from this room there are a lot of Labour Party people who would want to vote Labour in this constituency. And I think that's a valuable choice it's a valid choice to make in politics as well.
Okay, so can I just say that we've obviously got a lot of people who come particularly to make this point. This was a meeting organised long before the general election was called to discuss Labour's policies on climate. And I would quite like to keep us as closely as we can to discussing Labour's policies on climate, because how people choose to vote depends hugely on what they perceive parties' policies on climate to be. So I think can we try and keep that the topic, and you can listen to what Labour's policies on climate are and make your own mind up about other issues in maybe a different conversation. I'm going to ask Louise briefly to say something, and then quickly move on.
Just following on from what just following on from what Helen says, this is an election about the climate. So if you really do care about climate issues, you need to vote with your heart. You need to vote for what you genuinely believe in. Let's come back to the Brexit issue. I voted Remain, and I do agree that it would cause significant damage if we leave the European Union. So I'm clear on that, but I'm also clear that the Labour Party policy has a very clear message on Brexit. We're the only party that can offer a people's vote. So in this constituency, I do think it has become politicised in that respect. The Liberal Democrats have politicised it and made it just about Brexit. But we are the only party with our first past the post system, which I agree is not perfect. I support PR and I would be advocating PR moving forward. But as it stands, we are the only party that realistically are going to be able to offer people a people's vote. So if you vote for Labour, you're going to be putting the climate first, and that's what this meeting's about. But if you're also interested in a people's vote and you want a fair and democratic resolution to Brexit, Labour Party is also you as well.
Thank you for taking the time to address that issue, people on the panel. I'm also aware we have other people on the panel with a great deal of expertise who might also want to speak on topics around climate and action.
Thank you. I'm going to try and take it back to the climate emergency a little bit. I was lucky or unlucky enough to be at the Labour Party conference this September, and I took part in the debate where we composited the motion that eventually went to the conference floor. It was voted on unanimously by the Labour Party members at the conference. But the thing that struck me most, we spent 2 whole evenings, 2 evenings of 6 hours debating this motion. It was very long, it was very arduous. And the thing I learned from it is, I guess I knew it anyway, but the thing that was emphasised for me is that there are no simple answers to complex questions. So everybody came to that meeting with a shopping list of things they wanted to be done about the environment. And they tried to work all those things into the list. And I don't think it's going to be very easy because it's a complex problem. We need to have solutions that are flexible and are moving. So I wanted to ask the panel, it was mentioned, People's Assembly, as a way of looking at policy development in such a complex field. We instituted a public consultation process, but we don't seem to be individually very well engaged with that, and I'd like to hear what the panel think about how we should take the People's Assembly concept forward to dealing with the climate condition.
Committees are convened, or something 30,000 people are getting a group of 110 together. Sounds an odd relationship. But XR are a bit disappointed in the framework that they've set for that, because they're still, I think, looking at the 2050 target, and will be fried by then, so probably not use. And they're also, their recommendations won't be binding at all, they're just the advisory, which we really need to take more teeth than that. It is a sophisticated process, and it needs to be set up and supported properly. I think they're only also, I think one portion in Ireland they did over something like 8 weekends over a year, looking at it. Huge judgment on that. I think it's just entering to sort of just opening up to the spirit that we've all got more of a part to play in these processes, and we need to step up, and that's a way to really support that group of citizens to step up. Your ideas on, XR is great that it does appeal to across the generations, and the Climate Strikers movement is really inspiring. It's nothing to do with XR, and that's all young school children, isn't it? So, I suppose look to what they're doing and support that would be my idea. I'm sure you've got your own ideas on how to get youth more involved. They are in XR, it's brilliant, they're leading the way in lots of ways.
Thank you. Firstly, I couldn't agree more that this is not something that you can have one simple silver bullet to solving, and indeed this will change as it goes over time. On conference as well, the interesting thing about Labour Party, or one of the many interesting things about Labour Party conference, is that it is 50-50 constituency delegates and trade union representatives. And so in that debate, there was also a very important element of, quote-unquote, just transition. So you don't wind up with what we saw, which was in the 1980s when the coal mines were closed, when the heavy industries were closed, that was that for those communities. They just ripped the hearts out of those communities and nothing was given back into them, and there was no effort put into ensuring that there was future economy, that there was future wealth in those communities, and in some areas it has been utterly devastating. So just as an aside, it was only the European Union that actually invested in those communities. second thing about the citizens' assemblies, I think there is absolutely a role for them. In defence of the select committees, they had to get this process done really quickly because they had to get it initiated before the general election. So, there wasn't a lot of time for considered development of the idea, but I think they still managed to do a great job. I will also say, I think we touched on the need for a change of our constitution, and I think there is a massive need. This has been exposed brutally over the last 3 years. There is a massive need for constitutional change in this country. That applies to our voting system, but it equally applies to the way Parliament works, which I think goes hand in hand with the changes to the voting system. And that involves actually beefing up our select committees. So they are not just, in effect, advisory bodies that can be completely ignored, but they really only have a kind of an ability to raise the profile of issues and make points and comments, where they actually could have a legislative function as well. The committees I sat on in the European Parliament weren't like select committees, they were legislative committees. We made the law. And that, I think, is an important change that we need to be looking at as part of a wider constitutional settlement. And it also helps with that point about the need to be swift on our feet as the climate challenges we face go forward. On youth engagement, I'll say two things very quickly, which you'll be surprised to hear. One is that I think there's a certain amount of, again, this is how do we connect different movements. Looking around this room, I am not seeing a lot of young faces. And I think that there are various reasons for that. But I think we need to be using social media better, we need to be using other tools better, that we communicate together and work together. I think there's a lot of that inside Extinction Rebellion. But the second point I really want to make and emphasise and underline, and this actually touches on social media as well, is that youth are involved in this issue. They are there, they are out there, and they are connecting. And you raised the point about Greta Thunberg and what she's done. Well, when we had climate strikes, school strikes in this country, it was reported in this country as if it was only happening in this country. It took months for the national media to notice what I knew, because I was already in an international environment, to notice that this had started in Sweden was part of a global climate strike, because these young people were already connected. So actually, we've got to find ways, I'm afraid, of getting these messages out, because we are ahead of the national media on this and the traditional media on this. So it is also about how we actually connect, communicate, and motivate people to get engaged, and it has to be beyond those traditional routes that are not serving as well in this time. Thank you.
I'm going to ask everyone on the panel to have a little go on this one, because I feel like it's really touched a nerve about political engagement, which is really what we're all about. So, Patrick, do you want to have a go as well?
Yeah, thank you. As reaching out to young people, getting young people interested in young people, as various people have said, young people are already interested in it, they're ahead of us. And I think it's all we can do is to get the information, make sure it gets out to them, and that's the most difficult thing, because they take information from different sources from us. But there are members of the Green New Deal whose job is to do exactly that, to try and get the information out. Perhaps another reason I got interested in this kind of thing most recently is I have a grandson, and it is true that it's my grandson's generation are probably going to have to clean up quite a lot of mess here. As for local things, the Green New Deal is basically an economic policy, but it contains, it has a document, there are on the website for the Labour for a Green New Deal, there are 6 policy documents, which I mentioned a couple of them already, the agriculture one. There is one called A Democratic Public Ownership, and I think it's the most important one, but then I would because I wrote it. But anyway, it says that one of the great things about a Green New Deal is that it wouldn't just be about doing things which are green, it would be doing things, or things which are red, it would be doing things locally. And in particular, local ownership of resources, local ownership of energy capture, that kind of thing is very important. And so, I don't know if anyone's heard of the Preston model, the Centre for Local Economic Studies. The Preston Council have been embarking on a deliberate policy of local procurement. They try to source their resources locally. They try to do things as locally as possible. This has created an enormous amount of employment because, of course, that's what green measures do. So I think, in terms of economic policy, we need to try to shift the emphasis towards local ownership of production and local ownership of resources.
I know Louise works with young people, and I'm sure she has something to say about engaging young people in climate action.
Hi, yes, in my day job as a social worker, I work with very vulnerable young people. I'm currently working in secondary schools, and I've also worked in pupil referral units. So I'm working with some very disenfranchised young people who are feeling not listened to, young people with mental health difficulties. And I'm also, conversely, I'm in Climate Action Week and in my work on the Town Council, I've seen some young people really engaged with climate issues. I'm completely in awe of them, actually. They just speak, to quote an XR phrase, they speak the truth. They're not polluted by cynicism. They say it as it is, and it's just so heartwarming and so inspiring. But we need to stop. We need to prevent these young people that I've talked about, that I'm working with, from being disenfranchised. We need to get them engaged in our community. We need to make sure that these young people, their holistic needs are well cared for. So, anybody here know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Some of these young people I'm working with, they simply cannot, they can't think about anything else other than, getting a decent meal and getting a reasonable education. So we need to be looking at the whole picture if we want to get our young people on board. I fully support citizens' assemblies, people's assemblies. We really need a bottom-up approach to participation.
I see more hands. I also know we've been in this room a long time, and it's quite grueling for the panel members. And so what I'm going to do is going to take 2 more rounds of questions, but then I'm going to invite everyone to stay, have a cup of tea. I don't know if our tea can possibly deal with the numbers we have here, but we will try and get a few more drops out. And then you're very welcome to stay. You can meet Louise and the rest of the panel.
The same forces that are destroying humans are the same forces that are destroying nature. And I'd like to just tie it together as well with what you said about the truth being the first thing on the agenda for XR. And so my question is kind of looking at the role that the media play in upholding the interests of the forces that are destroying nature. Our press is owned, 70% of the press is billionaire owned. And it is still, sweeping people up into that, that belief that, everything's okay, or that, demonising somebody of the opposition, demonising forward, demonising whatever it is for the day that they don't want, in no way. My question is about what do you see as the potential role for XR, given that it really has captured, the public at the moment, to shine a spotlight onto the media and to be demanding truth from them, really showing how actually they are constantly messing up our electoral results.
We will put that to panel as a general question about how to get the media to tell the truth about the climate emergency. I think that would be great.
This is also about the media. It's related to how much of our media is skewed towards the right. And how to get across, so I agree with what the lady at the back was saying, how to get across the importance of climate change from the Labour Party's viewpoint and the Green New Deal, and the details of it, and how you're going to do it by 2030. Because I think a lot of voters are really disillusioned, and there's a lot of cynicism about. And if we could see in as much media as possible, not only that you're doing this, but how you're going to do it, I think the voters would really take that on board. Okay.
I think there's two questions you all together in both those, which is great, because there is a lot of detail, and if you start to look at some of it at the back, you'll see how do we get that detail across, and how do we convince that these solutions are actually workable.
One of the embarrassing things about the Green New Deal is that most people who write it are a third of my age. And I'm a granddad. I didn't go to the Labour Party conference. I was sorry I couldn't go, because I would like to have met all my colleagues, but they would have suddenly realised that I'm 3 times their age, and maybe that would have made a difference. I don't know. As to the media, the problem with the media, apart from the fact that most of it's owned by billionaires, is that the people in it come from very narrow bubble, range of people, and they can't understand anything which is outside that range. This is very noticeable when Jeremy Corbyn was standing for election the first time. People on Newsnight, people on Channel 4 kept on saying, how can you possibly stand for election? You're far too extreme. They're not. Sorry, mate, Jeremy Corbyn's not extreme in my book. It's just, this is the first time the Labour Party's been read at that for me, and I'm 74. To focus in a bit more on what the Green New Deal is trying to do, the first question people like Kathy Newman asked on Channel 4 of people like Greta and Extinction Rebellion was, okay, what have we got to give up? That's the way they think about it. What have we got to give up? The answer is, we ain't got to give up as much as them guys who are the ones who are consuming more of the resources. It's the ecological footprint which is the important thing. It's how much damage you do to the planet with a particular lifestyle. So I think that's a big thing to get over. The problem is, as I say, the media is self-selecting, and they come from a very narrow demographic group. And until they realise, I think, that there's an awful lot of people interested in this, then they would have to change what they're reporting. So make a lot of noise is the answer. I think, just keep going.
Thank you. I think, as I've already touched on it, this point about the media is a really, really important one. And I will... There are so many angles I can come at this from. It's kind of organising which one to pick up on. I think, firstly, we are in now one of those dramatic periods of change. Because actually, the national media don't have the impact that they once had anymore. So I remember all too well the 1992 election, where we were building up as Labour Party people, we were building up to winning that election, and genuinely thought that we might win in 1992. And then the Sun had that. I mean, it wasn't just the Sun, there were all sorts of other factors around that election, but they had that picture on the front page on the day of the election about Neil Kinnock, and they boasted afterwards it was the Sun what won it. They can't say that anymore. 2017 actually proved that. They can't say that anymore. But in a period of change, you also get first mover advantage, if you like. You get distortions in the new forms of media. And we have seen that as well. So we saw the stuff around Cambridge Analytica. We've seen all sorts of others that are, good and bad. It's not all bad. But so there are mechanisms by which we can now get messages out underneath that blockage at the kind of national media level, where there is a huge resistance to kind of left progressive policies. But it's not all perfect in that new world, so we have got to get right, we've got to get better at regulating that new world as well, particularly in electoral contexts. Because when it comes to how are we going to get our detail over, again, firstly, we're not going to get that much of the detail over. People who are interested and engaged are going to get the detail, and that's good and great, and we've got the detail for them. But it's actually how are we going to get our primary colours over? How are we going to get that bright picture that actually, if this is your thing, we are the right people for you? And in elections, broadcast media have rules in elections about fair coverage. And that really does help us. But also then, it's about getting that emotional context as well as the practical detailed policy context. And that, I think, elections provide us with an opportunity to do as well.
At the October action, there was an action outside the BBC centre offices, something that blockaded it. I'm not sure, it's almost like there's been a backlash and they're reporting us less than they were before now. There was definitely success, I think, in the April action, where they started just hardly reporting us at all, and by the end it seems like they changed their attitude around climate breakdown. So there was some success there. I mean, I'm not particularly familiar with what XR were seeking with the blockade of the BBC. I mean, I think it's generally by embodying this different form of politics, which is not being drawn into this tit-for-tat idea that that's the way to find solutions in politics, is to have two opposing views slinging different things at each other, and rather, as the gentleman there said, we need to find a way of taking the heat out of it, and to look to find complex solutions to a complex problem. If you enter into the game, you're stuck from the outset.
So how do we get the message across? Well, yes, as has already been highlighted, we have got a very right-wing media, but I think Extinction Rebellion have done very well in raising people's consciousness without the support of the media. What we need to do is we really need to engage our young people. I don't know if Jude Allen is here or Ben King. There's some really great initiatives about bringing political education into schools, particularly on climate issues. So training teachers to be aware of teaching climate issues. But I think first and foremost, to get our message across, we just need to speak with integrity and from the heart. And when we do that, we will get our message through.
I can't think of a better note to end on than to deal with each other and speak with integrity. Please stay around quickly at the end to meet with Louise, to meet with the other members of the panel. Thank you so much for turning out today.
Please vote Labour for a transformational